Good afternoon and welcome to Why We Talk, a platform for leaders and visionaries to discuss important community issues that face women, children, and communities of color. Here we can create solutions in the space of indifference and mutual respect. I'm your host, Dr. Doretha Walker, Chief Mission Officer of the YWCA Central Alabama. It is Get Out to Vote season at YWCA Central Alabama. For 119 years, YWCA has championed the intersection of race and gender with its mission to eliminate racism and empower women. The effort to gain and protect the voice of citizens has long been a part of the fabric of our state, which has only benefited from engaging all citizens. We wholeheartedly believe your vote is your voice. However, many eligible voters have become disenfranchised and disenchanted with the process of voting. Today's conversation will center the history and process of elections in Alabama and the effort to reiterate the importance of our voice, using that voice to build a more inclusive democracy. So I'm so excited to introduce our esteemed panelists today. We have Jessica Fortune Barker. Wait, Jessica. She's the director of Alabama Association for the Arts, a nonprofit organization serving to transform communities through arts, culture, and creative mind. Next, we have Dory Miles. Hey, Dory.
Hi.
She's a licensed attorney in California where she practiced civil rights education and labor law for many years. In 2019, she moved to Birmingham and has been volunteering with the Greater Birmingham Ministries as a voting rights restoration specialist. But certainly not least, we have Kadita Stone, who's the chief field and campaign strategist at Alabama Forward Action. How you doing, Kadita? Alabama Forward is a statewide civic engagement organization that advances efforts of nonpartisan organizations throughout Alabama to greatly expand the voter base, protect voting rights, and to make election systems as accessible as possible. So now that we've met our esteemed panel, and now you can understand why they're here with me today, let's get started. So Alabama has a rich history of being at the forefront of voting in many regards. Now, I'm not from Alabama. When I think of Alabama and voting rights, I think of the poll tax, I think of Bloody Sunday, the march from Selma to Montgomery, and I think of obstacles and challenges to voting. Alabama, we can think of it in many different ways, but also from diligently working to maintain state autonomy to serving as the battleground of the civil rights movement. Even today, the call for every vote to count remains strong. Unfortunately, the value of a vote remains unclear to so many people. So I'm going to start with you, Kadita. In an overview of the history of voting in Alabama, could you explain the power of participating in our democracy?
Yeah, I think it's the power in participating in our democracy. I think if we take a look at the beginning of where it started, which was right in Alabama during the civil rights movement, we look and see that the work that SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committees, did, that they started in Selma, that led to the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So there is a ton of power in the vote alone.
So what do you think we need to do to make sure that students, because like you said, it was like a student-led movement, that they are more engaged, and also maybe how they understand and recognize their own power?
I think that it's really going to take, I was having a conversation with Daphne earlier about impact and having fun. I think it's really going to take innovative ways and ways to implement fun into this impactful work to make an impact. And sometimes that takes going where these students are, meeting people where they're at. And sometimes it takes making it relatable to them, because people are only going to be involved in something that they care about. And if it's not something that that they can see at firsthand that will affect their future in whatever way possible, then sometimes they may not be involved. But if we're able to connect with them in ways to where they can see that direct impact, then that would be a way to get them involved for sure.
Thank you. It is often said that our vote is our voice. In 2020, we had a record turnout at the polls. However, more than 1 million registered voters decided not to cast a ballot. Effectively, more than 1 million citizens stayed silent. Jessica, can you speak to the importance of voice and how we can use our voice to advocate for change in our community?
Absolutely. So we overwhelmingly hear the saying that our voice is our vote and our vote is our voice. And as Kadita was saying, like if you go all the way back to Selma, and I'll even go even further back to what
Mhm.
happened in Lowndes County, which led up to the movement that started in Selma and led all the way through to Montgomery, that there is so much power in our voices. And we hear another saying that if it wasn't so much power, they would have tried to silence us, they would have
Mhm.
tried to suppress us. So we understand the power. And like you said, over 1 million, I think nationally, those are national numbers, but statewide, there were over, let me see, look, I know exactly here. There were actually over 400,000 who did not show up to the polls in the state of Alabama. And then when you break that down, as of right now, when you start looking at the voices who are not showing up, who should be showing up,
Mhm.
we have so much work to do when it then comes to the Black communities who are not showing up. And out of the state, the 3 top counties who we really need to be focusing on getting to participate in their power and their voice is Jefferson County, Madison County, and Mobile County. So we really, really do need to encourage, like Khadija was also saying, we have to start encouraging, engaging people where they are. So we really have to start looking in those spaces to get people to really understand that power in their voice.
So now you're coming from the community of the arts. So you're looking at it, you have the ability to look at it through a different lens. In what ways can we use the community of the arts to engage people into voting?
Yeah, so we do a lot of our work and our movement connects with our communities by first identifying the issues that impact that community, because the issues that impact Jefferson County are not the same issues that impact Madison County, Dallas County, where Selma is. Like, so we oftentimes look at state level work at a state level and think of how does Alabama compare to Georgia and Tennessee, but we have to get a little more intentional. And then once you start
Mhm.
getting intentional about those specific areas and what is happening in those areas, you then can develop a way to effectively engage those areas by meeting their needs where they are in a creative way. So that's where that arts, that culture, and that
Mhm.
creativity comes in, because as you now know that food insecurity is a need here, student loan debt is a need here, you now can come up with those creative ways through arts, through music, through culture, through spoken word, through whatever, to
Mhm.
reach those pockets of people that you want to reach.
And also potentially having those same people run for office. Because, there's one side, there's the vote, but then you also need representation in our government, state, local, and federal. And I think there's that scary leap from being the voter into leaping into office. So miseducation and lack of information continues to impact marginalized communities' ability to participate in our democracy. So Dory, today there are about 300,000 eligible voters who mistakenly believe that they are ineligible to vote due to a previous felony conviction. Tell me about the work you're doing to address this issue.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dorethia, and I'm really glad and privileged to be on this panel. Um, so you're exactly right. There was a big change in Alabama law in 2017 when the legislature, mainly because they realized that Alabama's voting eligibility laws were so chaotic and unmanageable and discriminatory, having a very disparate impact, so that many more African Americans were being denied the franchise than white people in similar situations. They realized they were going to be sued. And so that was really the impetus for the change in the law in 2017 that vastly expanded voting access for people with felony convictions. So the state of the law now is that in 2017, finally, there was a definition of moral turpitude. So for 116 years in Alabama, the 1901 Constitution barred people with felony convictions of moral turpitude from voting. But Alabama never defined moral turpitude. So it was left up to county registrars in each individual county to define moral turpitude when somebody came in with a voter registration application and had a previous conviction on their record, to determine whether that person's crime was one of moral turpitude or not. Well, it's not hard to imagine the results of that when all of the county registrars were white. So finally, in 2017, there was a definition, and now there is a list, literally, of 40 felonies that constitute moral turpitude. If you are somebody who has a felony conviction and it's not on that list, you're eligible to register to vote. A lot of people don't know that because the Secretary of State in 2017 specifically said that he wasn't going to spend any money educating people on the new law. So again, if your conviction is not on that list, you're eligible to register to vote. If your conviction is on the list, and incidentally, most of the felony convictions on the list happen to be what we understand to be crimes of poverty, like theft of property or burglary. You don't see embezzlement or the traditional white collar crimes on that list. But if your felony conviction is on that list, if you meet certain criteria, there is actually a fairly streamlined process by which you can get your voting rights back. So what I do is I literally work person by person to assist people with felony convictions and getting their voting rights back.
So can you just give us like a brief scenario of like a person that you have helped? I mean, no names, but.
Sure. And actually, I can share this person's name because he's extremely public about it. So I actually feel comfortable. I don't know, many of you at this point may have met Ronald McKeithen. He spent 36 years in Donaldson Prison, having been convicted of a non-injury robbery where no one was hurt. He had 2 previous burglaries arising from the same incident. And as a 21-year-old, as a result of Alabama's punitive Habitual Offender Act, he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. He was sentenced to die in prison for the crimes that I just described to you. Thanks to Alabama Appleseed, about 1.5 years ago, they were able to petition the court for resentencing of Mr. McKeithen, and he was released end of sentence, meaning no further obligations with respect to the criminal legal system. And we were able to assist Ron in getting his voting rights back through a simple application process to the Board of Pardons and Paroles. Each of the 2 burglaries and the robbery were convictions that took his voting rights away, but because he didn't owe any fines or fees and he had completed a sentence and he didn't have any felonies pending, he was eligible to restore his rights through a simple application process. The Board of Pardons and Paroles had 44 days after receipt of his application, and Ron voted for the first time in his life in the municipal election in August of 2021, and proudly will tell you that he voted for the winner, just saying. And he is, it is such an empowering thing for him to be able to experience full citizenship, okay? He now works for Appleseed as a reentry coordinator. He is so active in the community. He speaks all the time about his experiences. He is such a powerful voice, and I would suggest, you know, who's better to hear from with respect to criminal justice and criminal justice reform issues than someone like Ron. And so I am really glad that he has the right to vote, and then he exercises it. And I'll just say one more thing, because Ron moved from transitional housing into an apartment and called me to ask if he needed to update his registration because he had moved. Which, yes, he did. So anybody listening who's moved, you might want to make sure that your registration is updated. But so that's one example. And honestly, there are many examples that I could share.
Okay, you said something really interesting when you said about the fines, because to me that sounds like, okay, the poll tax again, even though I thought poll taxes were illegal. But when you said that, the fines, it just feels like a poll tax to me.
I couldn't agree with you more. That continues to be, in my view, a serious flaw with the system. And so in order to get your voting rights back, if you've lost them, you have to have paid back all of your fines, fees, or restitution. On the disqualifying, if you will, on the conviction that's taken your voting rights away. So had Ron, for example, owed some money on the robbery or the 2 burglaries, he would have had to have paid that money back in order to get his voting rights back. And we do see that as a poll tax. People should not have to buy back their voting rights. And for people who don't have money versus somebody who does have money, obviously the financially wealthier person can easily pay their fines or fees or restitution and get their voting rights back. So again, it impacts poorer people, people of color, in discriminatory ways. It needs to be changed. We have a lawsuit pending. We are not optimistic because of the nature of the US Supreme Court. We work every day in the Alabama legislature to try to get a bill passed that will change that. We were almost successful last legislative session, but the bill did die in the House. But we will, find legislators to sponsor that bill and hopefully even an improved version of that bill in this upcoming legislative session, and hope to be more successful.
Thank you. So I'm gonna put this question out there for any of you. According to a 2022 YWCA USA Why Women Vote report, young voters under 40, the millennial generation and Generation Z, now make up a third of the voting electorate and represent the largest, most racially diverse group of voters in the nation, and their influence in elections is poised to grow. How can we work toward encouraging this demographic to show up at the polls? I mean, we know they're registered, but what do we do to get them to show up at the polls?
I'll jump in and I'll say engagement and in education. We have to first educate them on not just the importance of showing up to the polls, but how these issues in their everyday life actually translate to a vote, because what we're hearing in the work that we do as we are encountering the young people, of course, we know that they're disengaged, but why are they disengaged? Well, overwhelmingly, they're disengaged first because they don't understand the process. Second of all, the results that they are seeing right now in our mainstream media is showing them that there's a problem with the validity of the vote system right now. So now we have to fight to restore the trust in just the process alone. So I think education is very critical as we are engaging the young people. And of course, again, back to what Kadita has said near the top of this conversation is, as we engage them, we have to meet them where we are. And when I speak with our faith communities, a lot of times they have outreach ministries and they want to talk about their reach. And even in this work as organizers, oftentimes when we have to develop reports and stuff, they want to know what is the reach. But I said we have to go beyond reaching people at this point, and we have to start touching people. It means nothing if I stretch out my arms and I reach and I'm not actually connecting or touching anything. I can reach all day and not make an impact. So we have to just be a little more intentional as we are engaging these students and these young people to me, setting up a table at a high school or a university with a voter registration sign on it, not going to do it. They're going to walk right by, or they're going to show up and sign up and not understand why they're signing up, and they're not going to actually show up to the polls. So we have to just really be a little more intentional as we are engaging our young people on taking that opportunity to also educate them, to in turn empower them to actually follow through with showing up on election day, which I really don't even call it election day anymore. We call it voter day, because elections are critical, but the voter is vital. And when we start centering our conversations and our work back on the actual voter as a person, and not on the actual issues they're facing or the process itself, I think that we'll start seeing a lot more engagement in our younger people.
I like that. Voter Day. I'm going to start using that. When I was a college professor, one of the things that I would say to my students, you know, that they needed to vote. They're like, oh, I don't pay attention to politics. And they don't, and you're right. I don't think they see that connection, that politics governs your everyday life. And then they're so focused on voting for the president, not realizing that their state people are the ones that control their daily lives. So that was like a conversation, an ongoing conversation that I had to have with them to get them to see that this is important. And then other people were like, well, civil rights is over, you know, we don't have to worry about that anymore. And again, explaining what are civil rights. But I remember growing up, like as soon as I turned 18, that morning I was marched down and I registered to vote, because I knew that, you know, my parents always told me that people died so that I could vote. And not only just as a Black person, but as women, we got the right to vote in 1940 by one vote. Senator of Tennessee. And that's because his mom sent him the note saying she wanted to vote before she died. So just think, if his mom hadn't interjected, where would we be now? So I think sometimes too, we also need to project into the future that, yes, it's about us right now, but it's also about those that are coming after us.
Yeah.
So I know, Khadija, I know you have something to say, so I'm just gonna let you go. Go ahead, girlfriend.
I just wanted to say, well, Alabama Forward, I just want to talk about some of the innovative ways that we've kind of tried to tap into that, meeting people where they are. So we have an initiative called Shake the Fields. And so out of that initiative, we've created these things called Trap Democracy Festivals. So we go to these neighborhoods where people don't vote. They're not interested in voting. Like you said, they don't understand the importance of voting. And we set up shop with community organizations, vendors, local artists, and we also allow local artists from that community or from that city to perform their art at these festivals. And we also have exhibits set up to where it's broken down to where people understand and can relate it to their everyday life, like just say, translate that information to the voter. So those are just some ways that we found to do those things. And even Dory was at one of those festivals in Montgomery. These festivals are going to be held across the state of Alabama, in different cities. But the festival that Dory was at, it was very life-changing for me, because two of the artists that performed, they got their voter rights taken away because they were felons. And afterwards, I was able to talk to them and just ask them, you know, what does it mean to you to vote? And they were like, well, actually, I can't vote. And I was like, why? And they were like telling me that what they had done. And I was like, oh, no. Yeah. Dory's over there with Return My Vote. Let's go find Dory to get that done. So that, you know, seeing those things in that area, and like just seeing the entire, you know, just meeting people where they're at, literally, that really it really set the fire in me. I already have a lot of fire in me, but that really set the fire up even more. And then even from these same events, we had 27 new registered voters from that neighborhood come out and register to vote. I mean, amazing. So just really, that is the definition of meeting people where they are. So I just want to say, yeah, that's what I want to say.
Yeah. And you know what? We honor the lived experience of others, and we respect each other's voices. And it really speaks to the power of collaboration, because you can't do this individually. You just can't. And meeting people where they are, it takes all kinds of people to go out to meet all kinds of people, to meet them where they are, because not one of us alone can meet everybody where they happen to be. So ensuring inclusivity of our democracy is a collaborative effort. No one entity can achieve it on its own. Considering the topics we discussed today, how can we engage intentionally and strategically to help others? And Khadija, gave some wonderful examples. But Dory and Jessica, what can you add?
Well, I want to give, in answer to that question, a big shout out actually to Kadida and Alabama Forward, because this, to my understanding, this is the first time in Alabama that there really is this kind of intentional effort to bring together a lot of progressive grassroots organizations in Alabama. So rather than, kind of people on top telling people what they should be doing, it's all of us who are doing this work on the ground, from nonprofits, of every stripe in Alabama. There really are a lot of us doing voting rights registration, restoration, feeding people who are in need, just so many examples that Kadida, could expound on, I'm sure, more than I can even, but Alabama Forward is bringing all of us together so we can share ideas and strategies in an intentional kind of way. And I don't think that's ever happened before. And I think it's a huge collaboration. And I'm very hopeful that if there's going to be change in Alabama, this is the time. We are really building a strong foundation to move forward. It's not going to happen overnight, but I am really hopeful that over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see some real change in this state in terms of more voter engagement, including a much wider demographic span, and it's going to result in changes in policies and people representing us.
Okay, Jessica, jump in.
So to piggyback off of the wonderful things that Ms. Dory has said, I think, again, when it comes to the state of Alabama, it's from the angle and the perspective from which you stand, because here in North Alabama, there is a lot of groundwork that has been and is being done in bringing multiple organizations from various walks together to do some of the similar things that it sounds like Kadida and them are doing. And I think they may be in the Montgomery or Birmingham area. And then, of course, I'm in North Alabama in the Huntsville area. And through Lift Our Vote, we've been able to do some very similar organizing work across the state of Alabama, to include at the Selma Jubilee in 2019. So it's really about now bringing these voices together. There, again, is no one organization, no one coalition even, that is going to be able to do the work that needs to be done to really change the tide in what we're looking at in the shapes of our communities right now. It's really going to take a collaborative effort. It's going to take the voices like Dory, Kadida, myself, oh Lord, there's so many organizers I don't even want to start naming, but we got like Kanisha Brown and oh gosh, it's just so many. And it's going to take all of us really coming together and putting our strategies, our plans together, and saying, okay, you got this, I got this, how are we going to put it here and make sure your people got my this and my people got your that, and really put that strong program and structure together that we need to really bring Alabama to where it needs to be, because we know Alabama is one of the most suppressive states, always has been, and we want to collectively change that idea that we don't always have to be. And like Ms. Dory said, we are standing in a time in which the tide is shifting. We're starting to see that not just through politics, but even the makeups of our own cities, Birmingham and Huntsville, and the booms that we're having with population and economic growth. So all of that translates back to a vote. And so if our people can understand that, like the excitement about, oh, the new city, and it's more progressive and it's more welcoming, or we have this going on, like we just have to keep reminding them, okay, if you like what you're seeing, keep voting, keep putting those voices in office. If you don't like what you're seeing, vote them out, get rid of them. And as you were saying, Dr. Dorothea, earlier, is we have to have representatives who will then step into those roles. And we need to start now with those younger people. So outside of just asking for their vote, we need to start identifying who's interested in taking on some of these leadership roles in these positions. And when we talk about politics, we have to stop looking at just our legislators. We have election officials and roles that and seats that we need to be filling as well, because oh Lord, I'm scared about this Moore versus Harper decision that's coming up with the U.S. Supreme Court. Because if we put elections back to state level and local jurisdictions to make the decision, as Ms. Dory said, what happened with the moral turpitude? Look at the mess that caused. So can you just imagine if our full electoral process is then put into the hands of our state representatives and officials right now? That's why it's so important for us to get to the polls this November and truly be intentional about how we vote and who we're putting into office, because we can't do anything about our U.S. Supreme Court justices and the decisions that they make, but we can prepare for who's going to be in office to take the brunt end of whatever that decision is. And if it does come back to being on our state legislators and our state leaders to make decisions for our elections, we have to be intentional in November in putting people in place that's going to make those decisions in our best interest in our own communities.
I agree. And it even starts with your school board,
Yes. Yeah, I was going to say too that, we have to create a pipeline of candidates. And in doing that, we have to provide financial support. One of the main reasons that younger people, people who haven't run before, who haven't necessarily developed the kinds of, foundational support or whatever, one of the reasons they can't run is because they don't have the financial ability to do it. So, we need to take the money out of politics, period. Okay. But, for the immediate future and the near future, we have to develop a pipeline of people who are raring to go, and they're here. You're here. You're even on this call right now. And we need to provide the financial support and the infrastructure so they can have, really competitive and winning campaigns, and then we'll start to see change.
I can surely attest to change. I just moved here from Savannah, Georgia. And if you're a painter, the last election, Georgia, we I wouldn't say we flipped it. We kind of turned it a little bit on it. It didn't completely flip over, but it flipped enough. And so when the young people saw that, it was like there was all this energy going. And when we had 3 recounts, I was involved in the first recount. People were like, well, again, what is happening? Why are we recounting? We've never done this at this level before. And then just having those conversations. But that being said, I moved here from Savannah in July 11th. I haven't registered to vote in Alabama yet because I don't have a house and a whole host of other reasons. But how does a new voter, when coming in, what resources should I tap into? Where should I go? How do I become educated on the slate of people that are up for election?
Well, for me, that's an easy question because Greater Birmingham Ministries, under the leadership, particularly of Amanda Cherry, a colleague of mine, for the last several years has been putting out this really amazing election guide, which literally has so much information in it about Amanda assembles an amazing group of volunteers. They submit surveys to all of the local candidates in Jefferson County and statewide candidates. Admittedly, we're not yet in Huntsville and northern Alabama, but certainly for people in Jefferson County. The election guide submits surveys to all the candidates, and independent research, nonpartisan independent research is done. The only goal of the election guide is to provide information so people can make informed decisions about who to vote for. So email amanda@gbm.org. The election guide for this November election is going through its final drafts. It'll be ready literally within days, and she will be happy to mail out, deliver, have you pick up as many as you need or want. And it's a really great tool. In fact, if y'all know, it was kind of funny, John Archibald from L.com, he was at a book club and had it in his back pocket for, for the last, and apparently he uses it all the time. So anyway, it's very user-friendly, and it has a whole lot of other information about registration deadlines and voting rights restoration and information that we all need to have.
Thank you.
Sure.
I just want to advocate for that because I have one in my car. It's my handy dandy voter handbook. So I'm just like that AL reporter you spoke about.
Well, that's amazing. Amazing. So again, this is for any of you. Provide an example how we can participate in our democracy beyond voting and registering people to vote, because we know that's just like one small part of it. There's work to be done before and work to be done after.
I would say first by showing up to these city council meetings, county commission meetings, school board meetings, any meeting that an elected official is making a decision for your community and you're not there, that's where you need to be. And then the second part would be to also show up, but also hold them accountable. Because yeah, they're elected, but they're elected to represent everybody, whether you were elected them or not. So holding them accountable to what they said they would do for the community. And those are, I would say those are the two things that people could do outside of voting.
I echo that completely, and would just say that calling and emailing any and all of your elected officials, from school board member to city council to governor, to senator to congressperson. These are really, believe it or not, it's been demonstrated many times that these are very effective ways to have legislators and our elected officials know that we're here, that we're interested, that we, even if we don't vote necessarily. I work oftentimes with people who've been incarcerated, for example, who can't get their voting rights back yet for one reason or another. They still too have an important voice, and they can call their representatives, because even though they're not a voter, they're still being represented by those folks in those offices. And it's important to communicate and let these folks know what our opinions are, our positions are, and urge them as strongly as we can to enact and operate in ways that really reflect the will of the people that put them there.
Jessica, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I say that in addition to what both Dory and Khadija said, is to keep talking about it and keep it the focal point. I know this past Tuesday for National Voter Registration Day, my team at Lift Our Vote and Pretty Rocks the Vote coordinated with Alabama A&M University, and we were able to register over 150 students. Wow. And we're still waiting on 2 other organizations to submit in what they were able to do from their area out there with us. And so just being able to not only register that many people, but like I said, we have to now keep them engaged. So offering them volunteer opportunities to continue to serve with us in the community, especially these are college students we're talking about, they have service hours that they have to fulfill for their, different degrees and everything. So just making sure that we just keep it in front of their faces and on their minds, just remaining engaged. And then, yes, holding our elected officials accountable is one way that we as the community can stay involved as well. And when we say hold elected officials accountable here, we say apply pressure. We tell our community all day, apply pressure They ran for the position. They're spending your taxpayer dollars within that position. Apply pressure. Anytime that you have a question, anytime that you have a concern and suggestion, even, this is your community. They're here to represent you. So you're at any time welcome to go through their door and state whatever you need to state, and make sure that you continue to follow through and make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do. So I agree wholeheartedly with these ladies, and I'm just super excited about the work coming up in Alabama that we're going to be able to get done. I know that we're going to really be able to turn the tide this upcoming election season.
Thank you. So at the polls, some voters are being turned away or blocked from voting. What are the rights of a voter at the polls?
Well, I would say certainly if they really are being turned away, they should demand to be able to vote a provisional ballot. Anybody should be able to vote at least a provisional ballot. And that's, that's some measure of protection.
Are those numbers posted at the polls?
Which numbers?
The if they, like a voter hotline.
That's a good question. I don't know if the phone numbers are actually published, but I do know that there are major efforts to inform people about various phone number, various hotlines that are available that provide voter protection.
May I jump in? And
Absolutely.
866-hour vote. 866-hour vote is the National Election Protection Hotline number. And that is a number for any voter issues or concerns. We do have an active Alabama call center, and we do have an active, Alabama work that's being done through the election protection. But that definitely is a number that we try to put out in front of as many polling locations as possible. There will be marketing that also rolls out, encouraging voters that if they see anything, if they feel like they were challenged at the polls and didn't get proper response, to please call that number, where we can then have legal and trained professional people to step in and help them navigate that process. We just want to make sure that we're offering full voter support services, is what we call it, for our voters. We also, through the election protection program, want to place as many volunteers as possible at these polling locations as poll monitors, to be able to encounter in a nonpartisan fashion any voters who are coming in and out of the polls who may have also experienced both good and bad, sharing their voter experience, where we can just make sure that we are celebrating the victories and that we are properly responding to any barriers or challenges that our voters may face. So it's all about just making sure that we support our voters on voter day, because it's all about them, right?
It sure is. It sure is. So let's talk about voter ID. So now I heard that there's a mobile ID. Can anybody speak to that? And who's like eligible to participate in that?
You can take that, Jessica.
I know.
Or Khadija.
Diplomatically, I'm trying to think this through of how to answer this in a diplomatic, because this is a public forum. So that was the face, and I'm sorry, I'm bad at hiding the face.
Oh, you're not by yourself.
But no,
Khadija started laughing, so I was like, okay, there's a little joke here that I don't know yet.
No, I will share from my perspective once again, and it's only my vantage point. But no, the mobile ID unit is something that is coordinated by the state Secretary of State office. I know that we have put in multiple requests to have the mobile voter ID unit show up to different functions in our communities, and it's always denied, or they're not available, or they don't have enough people to staff. And so it has never shown up to any of our events or in our community. As of this morning, I checked the Secretary of State website to see the listing of where their mobile ID unit would be, and Madison County is not even one of those counties in which they're even planning to show up. And if you remember at the top of this call, again, I stated that there's over 15,000 inactive voters. That voters that could be registered who are not. And so I would really, really hope to see that ID unit here. I know I placed a request for them to show up with us on National Voter Registration Day, and that request was denied, but we do have a need to have that presence in our communities.
So so how do you get, I'm just trying to figure out like, okay, so like what's the next step? And so now it makes me think, okay, the criteria for the mobile ID, I would think, you fit that. I'm just, again, like you, I'm like, and again, only been in Birmingham a little over 2 months, like just trying to navigate and understand what's happening on the ground here. So yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I do know that if you go into the county registrar's office in your county to register, they will take a photo of you there if you need it, and that can be used as a photo ID. That is not anywhere near a perfect solution. It's hard for a lot of people to actually get to the county registrar's office, but for people who can, they can get a valid photo ID that can be used on the day, on voter day.
Yeah, and at certain limited locations, like the DMV, you can get a free ID card. And also coalition if they're having trouble prior to an election.
So the voter ID card, is that separate from the non-driver card?
Yes, there are multiple, photo IDs that can be used on voter day. One is obviously an Alabama driver's license. It's interesting because you can't use, it has to be an Alabama driver's license. So, for somebody like you who's recently moved here, you probably don't have your Alabama driver's license yet. So you would need to, go to the county registrar in Birmingham, 716 Richard Arrington Jr. Boulevard.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Room 410A
Okay.
as an apple. And submit your voter registration application, and they'll take your photo, and you'll be able to use that. And I think what Khadija was saying is that at the DMV, you can get not only a driver's license, but also a valid non-driver's identification that can be used on voter day. I also want to point out just real quickly something that we haven't mentioned. Alabama is one of 6 states in the country that actually allows people to vote while incarcerated. So people who are in jail or in prison can vote if they're otherwise eligible in Alabama by absentee ballot. Obviously, it's incredibly cumbersome. I'm not going to stand up for the mail system at St. Clair Prison or Donaldson, or, but for people who may have loved ones who are incarcerated and are there with felony convictions, let's say, that don't stop them from voting because they're not on that list that we talked about before, like drug possession, for example, is not on the list. So people with felony drug convictions can vote without doing anything other than, the normal voter registration application. People should know, I think, that that is an option, that's available as well for people who may be incarcerated.
That's fascinating to me to know that it's one of 6.
I
Because
know.
because if you had asked me that question, I wouldn't have said Alabama would be one of them. I
Yeah,
wouldn't have said
and I
that.
don't know how it came to be. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's kind of anomalous knowing what we know about
Mhm.
Alabama.
I
But
mean, kudos for them for that, but yeah, that's
mhm,
just like this contradiction of all kinds of things.
mhm.
So we often look to books to share with our supporters. What is a book or a podcast or article that's been influential in your work as an advocate for social justice and voting rights, or just social justice in general?
Is this like most recently or just an overall book?
It can be either all and.
I'll let someone else answer first. I have to think about it.
Look, I'll go. Honestly, the Bible. And I'm not
Okay.
playing. When I say when it comes to social justice work, it has
Mm-hmm.
brought me, and I'm not a religious person. I'm gonna put that on out there. I love my faith community. I'm not a religious person, but I am very spiritually grounded. And when I say I have not come to the Bible in so many times as I have in doing this work, because this work, when you really connect with people at this grassroots level, you're going to encounter every issue. Like literally every issue is a voting issue. You're going to encounter mothers who need diapers for their babies and formula. Oh my God, that formula shortage put us all in a
Mm-hmm.
tailspin. You're going to encounter people who are hungry, people who need jobs and careers and are looking to you to help them. So, like when I say I have had to go to the Bible to keep my peace through this work, so that's my go-to book. And then there's an article that was written by my executive administrator, Gloria Hollins, and it's called Apply Pressure. And so that op-ed piece was published to Black Huntsville magazine. And that piece there really puts me back into why we're doing this work. She wrote a piece about the civil rights story and where we are
Mm-hmm.
today and how it still looks so similar yet so different, and how we can go about using the power in our voice. So those two pieces right there, those are my go-tos.
Before we move on, we do have a question. And Dory, you were with us last week when we had this question. So people that are living in a confidential shelter and cannot disclose their address, how do they get their ID to vote?
And that is still a burning question that I don't have a good answer for, but I can tell you we are thinking about it and trying to understand what the best answer is for that, because I was talking with Daphne and I actually misspoke. I didn't think they necessarily put an address on the mobile Secretary of State's voter ID if they came and took your photo and gave you a card, but yes, your address does go on that. So it's a very important issue. And we're thinking, working together to try to figure out what the answer is exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm
Because I'm sure
sorry,
that,
I'm
yeah,
sorry, I don't have more at this
I
point.
have a question about that, and I'm not sure exactly what organization may be working on that, but have they thought about using like a local church or something for the people that are in that confidential shelter?
we talked about that briefly, but then that requires them to go out and establish a relationship that they may not want to, because again, when we're thinking about people of, and here we're talking about a confidential domestic violence shelter. So then there's that fear of, when I go out, who am I talking to, and what connections does this person have with,
With that,
like
yeah.
it goes out that way. So we talked about perhaps getting, instead of a PO box at the post office, maybe having going to like a UPS store, because you can actually get a physical address, maybe doing that. But this isn't just a question for here at the Y. This is like a
Mhm.
question, nationwide. And we are doing some research to find out who's doing it, like what are the best practices to do that, because number one is, the safety is number one. And then also it's a confidential shelter. You're just very cautious on who you're having relationships with other than people that and again, not trying to say that somebody at the church is going to go out, but unknowingly you could be friends with the abuser and you don't know that because you don't know the person. It's just like so many different layers of security and confidentiality and fear.
True.
So yeah, we talked about that, but not everybody's comfortable with that. And then also there are people that are in a confidential shelter that's not in the district where they're registered to vote already.
Okay.
And then, so yeah, you can say, okay, they can do absentee ballot. Maybe that's the way, or so we're just trying to figure out the best way to make sure that this population is not disenfranchised, because again, there are people that actually we need to hear their voices, again, honoring lived experiences, but we also need to hear their voices as well. So that's one of the things. So if anybody has any ideas, we welcome them. We're trying to see how we can best serve the needs of several people. Okay, we got 5 minutes left. So does somebody else have a podcast, article, book that they
Oh yeah. So I have 3. Okay. So
okay, I like it.
I always go back to these 3 books. It's something, I find something new every time. So Strength to Love by Martin Luther King. Freedom is a Constant Struggle by Angela Davis.
Yes,
And
love
The New
her.
Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander.
Yeah.
Those are always the 3. I always go back.
What was the first one? I couldn't hear the first one.
A Strength to Love by Martin Luther King. I think The Strength to Love. Sorry, not A Strength. The Strength to Love.
Okay, Dory, what you got?
So as a much younger person, I remember being profoundly impacted when I read the autobiography of Malcolm X. And then more recently, Ibrahim Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist, actually, I found very, really resonated with me on a number of levels.
So we have 4 minutes left. What are your final thoughts and our call to action to get people to participate and get out to vote?
Well, I would definitely, call out to parents, guardians, mentors, relatives, and drag your young people to the polls if they're not already enthusiastic and willing. Take them with you. I just know that from the work I've been doing and from my own personal experiences, this is all intergenerational. My mom took me with her. I could barely reach her knees, I think, the first time I went to the polls with her. And so it was just something I did until I actually developed my own consciousness around doing it. And I've had this experience where I've helped people get their voting rights back and they're voting for the first time. And then they bring their mom or their child. And that would be my call to action, if you will.
Well, thank you all for joining me on this very provocative and important topic. I appreciate every single one of you. And I want you to know that our next Why We Talk is October 20th. It's in honor of Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and it's called Centering Survivors. So again, thank you all for lending us your voices and sharing through your each individual lenses, but it also shows that we are collectively involved in this and not one of us can do it alone, and there's a collaboration And I'm sure for all of you who are listening, you can reach out to any of these people or even to the YW, and we'd be more than happy to connect you and help you get out to vote, because as we've all said, is our vote is our voice, and our voice is our vote. And we need to center on National Voters Day. I'm going to use that from now on instead of Election Day. It's National Voters Day because it's all about the voters. So again, I appreciate you all and thank you. And please feel free to reach out at any time. Bye.